There are wounds you can never see on the skin, but they cut into your heart every single day. I grew up in a house where laughter was always present, but never meant for me. I used to think that if I just tried a little harder, I would finally be loved, until I realized, in their eyes, I was just a faulty draft. If you think every child is treated fairly in their family, then listen to my story. My name is Emma Peterson, and this is how I became an outsider in my own bloodline. I was born in a small town called Brookville, Ohio, in a typical, middle-class family. My parents, Andrew and Margaret Peterson, believed they could create a genius if they applied the right methods. Before I could even read, our house was overflowing with books about infant superintelligence, colorful flashcard sets, and charts crammed with notes on golden developmental stages. I still remember that evening, when I was just 3 years old, my mother holding a thick book and frantically flashing cards in my face. "Eva, hurry up, this is the letter B, you must remember. A child's brain only gets one golden opportunity." My father, who was reading the newspaper, simply looked up and shook his head. "Margaret, are you sure you're not pushing her too hard?" "No, Andrew, science has proven it. If we miss this window, Emma will be ordinary forever." My mother's voice was sharp as a knife, and the 3-year-old, could only stare at the blurred cards through my tears. But all those efforts ended. Game. I learned to walk, to speak, to count. Right on the normal schedule, neither slow nor particularly fast. There were no miracles. There was no child prodigy as they had hoped. I don't know exactly when they started to feel disappointed in me, but I remember clearly the moment they gave up. It was when my younger sister, Lily, was born. I had just turned 3 when our family welcomed a new member. Like a new beam of light illuminating the entire house. From the day she cried her first cry, all attention, all hopes, and all love were redirected to her. No more evenings with Mom teaching me to count. No more rushed hugs when I showed off a messy drawing from preschool. Only the constant whispers, "Shh, Lily is sleeping. Don't make noise, your sister needs to focus. Wait a minute. Mom's busy with Lily." I grew up, in the silence of my own making. If when I was little, Mom bought me random toys from the supermarket, then for Lily, every item was carefully selected. Brain development puzzles, bilingual books, funny pianos, Montessori learning tools. Mom even hired a child psychologist to guide Lily when she was just 2 years old. Lily spoke earlier than I did. Lily could read before entering kindergarten. Lily won the regional children's drawing competition at just 4 years old. Every achievement of Lily was like a medal my mother proudly pinned to her chest. And I, quietly teaching myself how to tie my shoes, how to fix difficult math problems, remained just a faded shadow. No one bothered to notice. I never blamed Lily. She was simply born after their failure me. My grandparents, Walter and Helen Peterson, were among the few who never showed favoritism. On Sunday afternoons, while my parents took Lily to talent development programs, they would pick me up. They baked cookies, told fairy tales, and held me tightly, whispering, "Our little Emma, you're perfect just the way you are." Those moments were rare pieces that kept my heart from completely breaking. But every time I returned home, reality hit like a bucket of cold water. Every evening at dinner, conversations revolved solely around Lily's latest accomplishments. "Lily got praised by her teacher today. She has the highest IQ in her." "Andrew, I think we should start Lily on piano lessons, she's got real talent." And me? Even if I earned an A in math or got elected class president, it was met only with a lukewarm nod. "Oh, that's nice, but you should try to learn from Lily." By the time I was 6, I understood one thing very clearly. In this house, I was just the trial run. Lily was the masterpiece. The following years, I became a supporting character in my own life story. At school, I had friends and found small pockets of joy. Being selected for the elementary basketball team, or winning second place in the town storytelling competition. But at home, no achievement of mine was ever enough to spark pride. Every time I brought home a certificate of merit, My mother would barely glance at it before tucking it into the chaotic pile of papers on the table, without a single word of praise. Meanwhile, Lily, now 7 years old, had a grand party thrown for winning a simple handwriting contest at school. There were balloons, a 3-tier cake, and relatives and friends crowding the house as if she had won a Nobel Prize. But all those unfair treatments still paled in comparison to the night that completely changed how I viewed my family. I was 11 years old that year. After months of saving allowance and doing odd jobs for neighbors, I had finally decorated my own room, the large bedroom upstairs, overlooking the backyard. I bought a light blue curtain, strung fairy lights around my bed, and plastered photos of me and my friends laughing under the sun. That room wasn't just a place to sleep. It was my little fortress. My private world where I could breathe, without judgment or comparison. But then Lily, now 8 years old, started to complain. "My room is too small," she whined one afternoon, struggling with her mini piano. "I need more space to practice." I heard my mother's voice drifting up from downstairs. "I'll talk to Emma." I wasn't worried. That room had been mine since I was a toddler. Surely there had to be boundaries, right? That night at dinner, my mother put down her fork, speaking in a tone as casual as discussing rearranging the furniture. "Emma, don't you think it would be nice to let Lily have your room? She needs more space to develop her musical skills." I nearly choked on my piece of chicken. "No, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's my room. I decorated it myself. I love that room." My father looked up from his newspaper, frowning. "Don't be selfish, Emma. Your sister needs space to develop her talents." I turned to look at Lily. She was giggling, her face beaming as if Christmas had come early. "What about me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Don't I deserve something of my own?" My mother sighed, as if exhausted from having to explain something obvious. "You need to learn to sacrifice for your sister's future. A little inconvenience now is worth it for Lily's success later, isn't it?" The answer was buried in the cold silence that cloaked the dinner table. I understood right then. In their eyes, I had no future worth investing in. The next day, when I came home from school, it was already done. No warning. No chance to protest. My belongings. My bed, my desk, my posters, even the photos with my friends, were stuffed into the smaller room at the end of the hallway, where light barely seeped through a tiny dusty window. Meanwhile, the large room, my room, was now filled with musical instruments, books, and small awards covering the walls like a shrine to the newly anointed prodigy named Lily. I stood frozen in the doorway of my new room. Bare walls, the suffocating smell of old paint, and a rickety bed I hadn't even chosen. I bit my lip hard, fighting back tears, but in the end I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. No one came to comfort me. No one cared. That night, I curled up on the cold bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, and swore I would never again believe in the justice of family. If someone were to ask me, "When did you realize you truly didn't belong there?" I wouldn't hesitate to answer. That night. The night I was pushed out of my room, and out of the rightful place of a firstborn daughter, so they could make space for a dream sculpted from someone else's ambition. I understood. In that house, fairness did not exist. Only interests, expectations, and a fabricated title my parents clung to desperately. And I, Emma Peterson, stopped dreaming. From that moment on. Only a cold clarity remained. And a small ember of fire, quietly waiting to ignite. 18 didn't come to me with grand parties or warm congratulations. It came with the cold slap of reality. Throughout 3 years of high school, I quietly pushed myself. I joined the business club, volunteered at the local community center, and maintained a GPA of 3.7. Not exceptional, but solid enough to attract attention from several respected public universities. Each night, while friends went out partying, I stayed home, researching scholarship essays and working part-time at a local bakery to save every hard-earned dollar. I promised myself, No matter how indifferent my parents were, I would carve out my own path. As college application season approached, I was excited. The list of schools I wanted to apply to was taped beside my desk. Ohio State University, Indiana University, University of Michigan, all with strong business programs I dreamed of joining. And then came the fateful dinner. A regular Sunday evening, the whole family gathered around the table. My mother had just placed a pot of beef stew on the table when Grandpa Walter and Grandma Helen arrived, as they never missed a weekend gathering. The air was initially light, with the clinking of forks and knives, and Lily's bubbly laughter as she boasted about being invited to a national music summer camp. I waited for the right moment, took a deep breath, and smiled nervously. "Mom, Dad, I want to talk to everyone about my college plans." Grandpa Walter and Grandma Helen immediately paused, their eyes filled with encouragement. My mother, Margaret, glanced at her watch and nodded perfunctorily. "Make it quick, dear, I still have to call Lily's piano teacher." I swallowed hard, trying not to let her indifference break my spirit. "I've applied to 3 schools. If all goes well, I could get into the business program at Ohio State. I really want to pursue finance." I waited, hoping for a nod of approval, a smile, or at least a simple congratulation. But nothing came. My father, Andrew, set down his knife and fork with a cold clank. He stared directly at me, his voice low and grim. "Emma, your mother and I have discussed it. We won't be able to support you financially for college." I froze. My mother added, emotionless, "We have to focus our investments on Lily. She has real potential. Conservatory tuition and special programs are going to be very expensive." I felt like the air around me was thickening, making it hard to breathe. But what about me?" I whispered, barely able to speak. "Emma, you need to be realistic," my father said coldly. "You don't have Lily's natural talent. You can attend community college, work part-time. That's a reasonable path. No apology. No regret. Just a verdict delivered as if I were a failed investment they needed to cut loose." Across the table, Grandpa Walter gripped the armrest of his chair, his face turning red. Grandma Helen looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The air was so heavy it felt like it could be sliced. I don't remember finishing dinner. I only remember rushing upstairs, slamming my door so hard it shook the walls, trying to seal away the hurt. I slid to the floor, clutching the acceptance letter from Ohio State, tears streaming uncontrollably down my face. No one's going to save me, I thought. I have to save myself. But I was wrong. A gentle knock came at the door. "Emma, it's Grandma," Helen's soft voice called. I didn't answer, but she came in anyway, carrying a large envelope. She sat beside me, wrapping her arms around me just like she did when I was little. Her voice was firm but tender. "Grandpa and I have decided, we're going to cover your entire college tuition." I looked up, eyes brimming with tears. "But that's too much money, I can't." She smiled kindly, wiping the tears from my cheeks. "You don't have to refuse. You've worked so hard, never asked for anything. You deserve this. And most of all, your grandfather and I believe in you, Emma." At that moment, for the first time in a long while, I felt truly valuable. Not because I was outstanding, not because I was special, but simply because I was myself. The day I received the acceptance letter from Ohio State University, Grandpa Walter opened a bottle of wine he had saved for 20 years, to celebrate. Grandma Helen prepared a special dinner, beef stew and apple pie, my childhood favorites. I left Brookville at the end of that summer, with 2 worn-out suitcases, a small scholarship, and the unwavering love of my grandparents. The most precious asset I carried with me. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But at least, I wasn't walking into darkness. I walked forward with the belief. Even if the world turns its back on you, as long as someone believes in you, you can achieve anything. College life was like a door finally opening after years spent trapped in the dark. Far from the suffocating house in Brookville, I began a new chapter. At Ohio State, I was no longer Emma, the talentless girl. I was simply me, a finance major, determined to prove that real worth doesn't come from favoritism or shiny medals. I threw myself into studying as if every day were a battle. Early mornings working part-time at the university library, afternoons attending lectures, and late nights buried in textbooks. Whenever exhaustion hit, I remembered my mother's indifferent gaze and my father's cold words. "You need to be realistic." Those wounds became the fuel that burned my determination. In my first semester, I earned a GPA of 3.9. By the second, I was invited to the dean's list for outstanding students. By my sophomore year, I secured an internship at a small investment firm in Columbus. There, I learned how to analyze markets and spot opportunities where others only saw risks. Step by step, I rebuilt myself. With sweat, tears, and relentless perseverance. Every weekend, I called Grandpa Walter and Grandma Helen. They always listened, always celebrated even my smallest victories, like finishing a group project. I never felt alone again. While I climbed steadily, Lily in Brookville began spiraling downward. The first bad news came during the fall of my sophomore year. One evening, while typing up a final report, my phone rang. The caller ID read, "Grandma Helen." I answered immediately. "Emma?" Her voice was heavy. "It's about Lily. Things aren't going well." I stayed silent, listening. She explained that Lily, once the undeniable child prodigy of our family, had been accepted into Berklee College of Music in Boston, one of the most prestigious schools in America. My parents had poured an enormous amount of money into getting her there. But just a few months in, everything started falling apart. Without Mom constantly hovering or Dad shielding her from every stumble, Lily became a small boat lost at sea. She neglected her studies, threw herself into partying, drinking, and chaotic relationships. Grandma Helen sighed. "Last week, Andrew and Margaret received a warning letter. Lily is on academic probation. If things don't improve, she'll be suspended." I listened, my heart heavy, though I couldn't deny a bitter feeling rising within me. For years, they had clung to an illusion. They had molded Lily into a symbol. And now, that symbol was crumbling by its own hand. The bad news kept coming like a hailstorm. A few months later, I got another call. This time, from Grandpa Walter. His voice trembled with anger. "Emma, it's happened. Lily was expelled, failing grades, disciplinary violations, reckless behavior. Everything." I sat frozen in my dorm room, staring out the window into the snowy night. It turns out, I wasn't the only one ever disappointed by my parents. Now, they were tasting the bitterness of misplaced expectations too. After getting kicked out of Berklee, Lily returned home, bringing nothing but trouble. According to my grandparents, she spent most of her time sleeping in, scrolling through social media, and whining about how unfair the world was. My parents, still trapped in the habit of shielding Lily from consequences, continued pouring money into hopeless schemes. Hiring private tutors. Enrolling her in life skills courses. Even buying her a new car, hoping it would boost her morale. But nothing changed. Lily refused to work. Refused to go back to school. Refused to grow up. Every time I heard updates from my grandparents, I felt both sorrowful and relieved. Because I knew. If I hadn't walked away from that house years ago, I might have been trapped too, living a life others had designed for me, instead of my own. In my final year of college, I received an internship offer from Meridian Financial, the largest investment firm in the state. When I stepped into that gleaming glass building, wearing a crisp gray suit and carrying a portfolio of my hard-earned achievements, I knew I had gone further than they ever imagined. I had left the past behind. I had broken free. Not with their support. Not through favoritism. But with my own hands and my own will. Emma Peterson, the ordinary child once dismissed, had become a warrior. I never thought I would randomly run into them, the people who once considered me a burden, On an ordinary spring morning. That day, I stopped by Marcia's supermarket in downtown Brookville to pick up a few groceries. I was debating between two types of organic apples when a familiar voice broke into my thoughts. Emma? Is that you? I turned around. Standing before me were my parents, Andrew and Margaret Peterson. I looked much older. Deep wrinkles etched across their foreheads, my father's hair almost completely gray, and my mother clutched her shopping basket like a lifeline to steady herself. There was no scolding, no scrutinizing glare. There was only awkwardness, and something that felt almost like regret. I nodded, forcing a smile. Hello, Mom, Dad. A long silence stretched between us. So heavy it felt like the whole world had frozen. Finally, my mother spoke first, her voice trembling. We've missed you so much. My father nodded along, adding, Maybe. It's time we reconnect, don't you think? I gripped the strap of my bag tighter. Years of abandonment, belittlement, and judgment flooded back like a tidal wave. But instead of anger, I felt a chilling calm settle inside me. I smiled politely. Maybe so. We exchanged a few awkward small-talk questions. They asked what I was doing now, and I answered simply. I work at Meridian Financial. Both of them lit up with visible surprise. There was no need to brag, I knew they would look it up themselves soon enough. They would soon realize that the daughter they once deemed a lost cause was now one of the most promising investment analysts in the state. Before we parted ways, my mother cautiously suggested, But maybe you could come over for dinner sometime? The whole family would love to see you. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to turn around and walk away without a word. But another part, the part that had long given up seeking validation, whispered, It's okay, just one dinner, I'm not the same anymore. I nodded. Sure, I'll arrange it. The first dinner after years of absence happened on a Saturday evening. I drove back to Brookville, stopping in front of the old house, where every painful and joyful memory still lingered. Everything outside looked the same, peeling paint, overgrown lawn. But this time, I entered not with a fragile heart hoping for approval. I stepped in as an adult, with firm boundaries. The house smelled of beef stew and fresh-baked bread. My mother rushed out and hugged me tightly, her eyes brimming with tears. My father patted my shoulder awkwardly, as if unsure what to say. Dinner unfolded in a strained atmosphere. They kept asking about my work, their eyes a mix of pride and regret. I shared just enough, not boasting, not hiding, about the investment projects I had led, and the fact that I had recently been promoted to senior analyst. Every time I spoke, I saw my mother exhale softly. My father kept his head down, staring at his plate. No one mentioned Lily. Until near the end of dinner. My mother cautiously brought it up. Your sister, Lily. She's still trying to find her way. Sometimes. She asks about you. I smiled lightly, without bitterness or sarcasm. I hope she finds what she truly wants. And that was all I said about Lily that night. No blame. No reopening old wounds. No more waiting for fairness from those who had once turned their backs on me. Since that dinner, my parents began reaching out more often. Short text messages checking in. Invitations to holiday dinners. Awkward but earnest birthday cards. I didn't shut them out completely, but I never let myself step too close again. I set clear boundaries. We could have dinner a few times a year. We could talk politely, but we would never go back to the old days. Because I knew their regret wasn't rooted in loving me too little. It was because now, I was a success they could no longer claim as their own. And that was the sweetest victory. One winter evening, after a quiet dinner at a small restaurant outside town, my father clumsily handed me a small gift box. I opened it. Inside was a finely crafted silver fountain pen, engraved with my name, Emma Peterson. My father stammered. Just a little gift for your new position. I smiled, thanked him, and carefully tucked it into my bag. Not because I needed their recognition anymore, but because I knew I had validated my own worth long ago. Success didn't come to me overnight. It came after years of sleepless nights, stressful projects, and silent battles with myself. At 27, I was promoted to Director of Investment Analysis at Meridian Financial, a milestone even the most arrogant executives had to respect. I decided to host a small party to celebrate. Nothing extravagant. Just an intimate evening with family and a few close friends. I booked a private room at La Belle Maison, the most upscale restaurant in town, and wired the deposit and event costs to my mother, Margaret, so she could help organize it while I was tied up with meetings. My mother, outwardly enthusiastic, assured me, "Leave everything to me, Emma. You just come and shine." I believed her. Despite the old scars, I wanted to believe that after everything, my family could finally appreciate my efforts. On the day of the party, I wore my favorite black square-neck dress and the pearl necklace that Grandpa Walter and Grandma Helen had given me at graduation. When I stepped into the event room, I froze. Everywhere, white roses, the flowers Lily loved, covered the space. No congratulatory banners for my promotion. No sign with my name. No mention of the work event. Before I could ask anything, my mother grabbed my hand, beaming. "Sweetheart, you're here, hurry, everyone's waiting." Confused, I was ushered into the center of the room, where all the relatives had already gathered. I was just about to speak when my mother raised her champagne glass, her voice ringing with pride. "We're gathered here today to celebrate a very special occasion. Our wonderful daughter Lily is officially engaged to Evan Chambers." Thunderous applause erupted, drowning out the lump rising painfully in my throat. Lily, in a sparkling sky-blue dress, beamed brightly as she flashed her dazzling diamond ring. I stood frozen, paralyzed. My eyes swept across the room. Everyone was focused on Lily, cheering and clapping. No one, not a single person, seemed to realize this was supposed to be my celebration. I tightened my grip around the wineglass, my fingernails digging into my palm. As I was about to step forward and speak, a hand clamped down hard on my wrist. My father. He leaned close, his smile frozen in place for the crowd, but his voice cold as steel. "Don't you dare make a scene, Emma. If you ruin this night, you can forget about any inheritance, forget about this family." I lifted my head and stared at him. There was no love in his eyes. Only cold, sharp threats. For a moment, I felt like that little girl again, the one who was always told to stay silent. For the sake of the family. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I took a deep breath, released his hand, and stepped boldly into the center of the room. The lively chatter and laughter died instantly. I held my head high, my voice ringing out. "Everyone, if I may have your attention for a moment." Every eye turned toward me. Lily blinked in confusion. My mother gripped Evan's hand tightly, whispering frantically. My father glared at me, his gaze searing. I smiled lightly. "I would like to share the real reason for tonight's gathering. This party? This venue? This catering? Everything was organized and paid for by me. Originally, it was meant to celebrate my promotion to Director of Investment Analysis at Meridian Financial." A murmur rippled through the room. "I had asked my mother to help with the arrangements," I continued steadily. "But she chose once again to turn my night into a stage for Lily." A heavy "oh" echoed from somewhere in the crowd. Eben, the so-called fiancé, stood up abruptly, his face pale. "Wait a minute. Margaret told me this was our engagement party." I shrugged and looked straight at my mother. "They didn't even bother to tell me." The air grew suffocating. Someone quietly set their champagne glass down in a corner. Evan turned to Lily. "You lied to me?" Lily, her face flushed bright red, stammered. I just wanted everything to be perfect." Evan shook his head and stepped back. "If you treat your own sister like this, how would you treat me? The engagement is off." The screech of chairs scraping the floor filled the room as he stormed out, leaving Lily collapsing into sobs. I turned to my mother, her face now deathly pale, trembling with rage. My father clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. He roared, "You've cut yourself off from this family, Emma. Don't expect anything from us ever again." I simply smiled. A light, effortless smile. "Don't worry," I said softly. "I don't need anything from people who never considered me family." I turned my back and walked calmly through the stunned, silent room, past familiar faces now twisted in awkward discomfort. My steps were steady, each one taking me further away from the years of injustice. I walked out without regret, without hesitation, and without ever looking back. I strode down the hallway, leaving behind the whispers, the muffled cries of Lily, and the furious grumbling of my parents. But the story wasn't over yet. Just as I steadied my breathing and was about to exit the restaurant, a familiar voice called out, "Emma, wait." I turned around. Evan, no longer Lily's fiancé, just Evan, was running after me, his face tense. He stopped, panting. "I'm sorry, I really didn't know what was going on." I looked at him, no resentment in my eyes. "It's your fault. But now you see the truth." Evan nodded, his expression hardening. "I'll never associate with that family again." A brief silence passed between us. Then Evan pulled out an envelope from his pocket. "This is the prenuptial agreement her mother asked me to sign. I was willing to overlook it because I loved Lily. But now, I realize it was all just a performance." I took the envelope, thanking him silently with my eyes. Evan squeezed my hand once firmly before walking away decisively, as if shedding any remaining connection. Inside the banquet room, chaos had broken loose. Aunts, uncles, and cousins buzzed in whispers, their faces full of suspicion. Grandpa Walter and Grandma Helen stood silently in a corner, their expressions sharper than ever. I returned to the room, this time to end it properly. Standing tall in the center, my voice rang out clearly. "I think everyone deserves to know another truth." All eyes snapped toward me. I raised the envelope in my hand. "This is the prenuptial agreement that Lily and my mother prepared for Evan. It includes a clause demanding he transfer 20% of his personal assets into a shared fund, controlled by my mother." Gasps and murmurs erupted around the room. "They didn't just plan to exploit Evan's feelings," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. "They intended to rob his entire family's fortune." My mother's face turned pale. My father slammed his hand down on the table. "That's enough, Emma, you're disgracing this family." I didn't back down. "No. It's greed and deceit that disgrace this family." My gaze swept over the familiar faces, those who once turned a blind eye to the injustice against me, but now sat in silence, listening. I lifted my head high and continued. "I've stayed silent for too long. Today, I'm not afraid anymore." At that moment, Grandpa Walter stepped forward, leaning on his cane, his voice deep and firm. Am I?" I turned to look at him. He placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You are not alone." Grandma Helen also approached, her face glowing under the lights. "We want to announce to the whole family that we have changed our will." The room erupted in murmurs. Grandma Helen squeezed my hand, pride shining in her eyes. "Our entire estate, the house in Brookville, the farm, and our savings, will go to Emma. She is the only one who truly values honesty, hard work, and dignity." A wave of shock rippled through the room. My mother's mouth fell open, my father turned deathly pale. You can't do that," Lily screamed, her makeup smeared with tears. Grandpa Walter looked directly at her, unwavering. "We've seen it clearly now, Lily. A family cannot be built on lies and shameless ambition." Grandma Helen sighed. "We love all our grandchildren, but we can no longer enable wrongdoing." No one defended Lily or my parents. Not a single person. The truth had been exposed, with nothing left to hide. I left that night with my grandparents, the whispers and murmurs fading behind me. No more tears. No more bitterness. Only a profound sense of relief. The Brookville night sky stretched out in a deep serene blue. I looked up at the twinkling stars, a fierce pride swelling in my chest. At last, I had stood up for myself. At last, I didn't have to wait for anyone to save me. I had become the hero of my own story. And that journey was only just beginning. After that chaotic night, I made a decision that could not be undone. I blocked my parents' and Lily's phone numbers. I unfriended them on every social media platform. I severed every remaining tie, no matter how fragile, that connected me to them. No more anger. No more regret. Only pure liberation. In the days that followed, I poured all my energy into my career. With the quiet support of Grandpa Walter and Grandma Helen, my steadfast anchors, I took steady steps on the path I had chosen. At Meridian Financial, I worked relentlessly. I threw myself into challenging projects that others shied away from. I learned how to spot opportunities in chaos, how to negotiate with the shrewdest minds on Wall Street. 3 years after being promoted to Director of Investment Analysis, I made headlines with a bold investment strategy that helped the company navigate a regional economic crisis. My name started appearing in financial magazines. My keynote speech at the International Investment Conference earned a standing ovation from a crowd of 2,000. And then, something I had never dared to dream of happened. One crisp autumn afternoon, in the sunlit boardroom of our headquarters, Mr. Davidson, the current CEO, smiled at me. "Emma, the board has voted. We want you to be the next CEO of Meridian Financial." The room fell silent. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. I'm truly honored," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Mr. Davidson stood and shook my hand, his eyes full of trust. "You're not just the best choice, you're our future." The news was announced the very next day. Headlines screamed, "Emma Peterson, youngest CEO in Meridian Financial's history." While the financial world buzzed with excitement, my grandparents wept with joy. That evening, we celebrated quietly at their house in Brookville. No extravagance, no pretense. Only those who truly loved me were there. Grandma Helen hugged me tightly, her voice trembling. "We are prouder of you than anything else in this world." Grandpa Walter uncorked an old bottle of champagne he had saved for decades, raising his glass. "To Emma, the girl who never lost herself." I clinked my glass with theirs, my heart full of the purest happiness. No need for the approval of those who once belittled me. No need for hollow recognition. Only the love of those who believed in me from the start. In the following months, I embarked on a new journey as CEO. I reformed investment processes, expanded into sustainable development sectors, and established a scholarship fund for underprivileged finance students, naming it the Walter Helen Foundation, in honor of my grandparents. I also bought a small house in the suburbs of Columbus, with a backyard full of lavender, just like the childhood dream I once dared to imagine. Every morning, standing on the porch, watching the golden sunrise wash over the lush green lawn, I silently gave thanks for the old wounds. They had taught me how to grow. They had forced me to choose my own path. As for my parents and Lily, I only heard news of them through old acquaintances. Lily was still living in Brookville, changing jobs as often as changing clothes. She had never truly found her footing. My parents? The ones who once believed they were raising a genius? Now lived in bitter disappointment, clinging to the shattered remnants of the past. They tried to reach out a few times, sending apologies through intermediaries, saying how much they missed me. I responded with silence. Not out of hatred, but because I had closed that chapter. I was no longer the little Emma who curled up in a tiny room, yearning for a word of praise. I was Emma Peterson, a woman who had built herself with determination and integrity. One spring afternoon, sitting on my porch, I opened an old journal where I had once scribbled youthful wishes. On the last page, it read, "I hope that one day, I can be free to be myself, strong enough not to need anyone to save me." I laughed, full of deep contentment. That dream, I had fulfilled. Not because of luck. Not because of help from those who turned away. But because of myself. With everything I had. And everything I had become. Emma's story reminds us that sometimes, family is not the place where unconditional recognition and love are found. Despite being overlooked, betrayed, and stripped of opportunities, Emma refused to let the past define her worth. She chose to rise on her own, building her path with steadfastness and honesty. Emma's greatest success wasn't just becoming a young CEO. It was reclaiming her freedom, dignity, and belief in herself. Something no one could ever take away. What do you think about Emma's journey? Have you ever experienced a moment where you had to stand up for yourself like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more touching family stories.